and listen at your leisure should you miss us any day in real time. But I am delighted, as always, to have you along live with us today for the next 3 hours. You can also watch the live stream of this program by tapping on the KBLA TV icon on our app or by going to our YouTube channel. And let me invite you to follow me on Facebook and Instagram at The Real Tavis Smiley and get Twitter updates at Tavis Smiley. Another great show on tap for you today. In our second hour, a conversation with acclaimed poet, literary critic, and Dartmouth professor Joshua Bennett about family, life, death, vulnerability, the joys and dreams of youth, and a great deal more. His most recent book of poetry is being adapted, I should say, both, by Lena Waithe and Warner Brothers Television. Joshua Bennett comes on board in hour two, and given the great professor and poet and critic that he is, as I said a moment ago, I'm sure the conversation will cover a lot of ground in hour two. I look forward to it. In our third hour, a dialogue about cultivating self-worth, unconditional self-worth, with the noted psychologist, Dr. Adia Gooden. But in this first hour, two more conversations. On the B side of this hour, new data about how the high rate of joblessness for black men affects black women. We'll be joined by Dr. Algernon Austin, Director for Race and Economic Justice at the Center for Economic and Policy Research. We'll begin today's program in a few moments, talking politics with Brandon Johnson. Now, when we last spoke to Brandon Johnson, it was the day before Election Day in Chicago, you may recall. And we told you then that he was coming on strong in that mayor's race. They had, 9 or 10 people in the race. Everybody in the race was a person of color except one person. So one white person in the race with 7 or 8 others. And we told you the day before Election Day that there was a good chance that Brandon Johnson would end up as one of the top 2 finishers in the runoff for mayor in Chicago. He was coming on strong that day, as I mentioned, and I thought there's a good chance he'd be one of the top 2 finishers. Well, all I can say is this. I love it when I'm right. Doesn't happen all the time, but I love it when I'm right. Brandon Johnson did finish in the top 2 in the race for mayor in the city of Chicago, and we will be joined by him in a few moments from the campaign trail in Chicago to find out how the race is going. Now, why am I talking to Brandon Johnson? Well, 1, he's in the runoff, as I said, but 2, presently the mayors of America's 4 largest cities are all African Americans. Here's the question. Can you name them right quick? I'm not going to ask Miles. I see Miles rolling his eyes. Can you name the 4 African American mayors of America's 4 largest cities? Miles, you want to take a stab at 1 or 2 of these? Eric Adams in New York City, correct. Nope, 4 largest cities. She's mayor, D.C., not 4 largest. That was obvious. You should have started there. Karen Bass in L.A. So you got 2, Eric Adams in New York, Karen Bass in L.A. Lloyd Lightfoot in Chicago, that is correct. And the 4th one, Sylvester Turner in Houston. There are your 4. Pretty good, Miles. 3 out of 4 ain't bad. So, again, the mayors of the 4 largest cities in this country right now are all African Americans. Eric Adams in New York, Karen Bass in L.A., Sylvester Turner in Houston, Lori Lightfoot in Chicago. So, if Brandon Johnson can pull this off in Chicago and take the seat that Lori Lightfoot now presently holds, we will hold with 4 African American mayors of the 4 largest cities in this country. I've joked before that they will happily turn over cities and the nation, for that matter, to black electeds when things get so bad that they don't want to deal with it, right? That's how Barack Obama became president. Okay, things are so bad now. We're going to give a brother a chance to turn this thing around. And in L.A., I asked Karen Bass, why do you really want to be mayor? I'm glad she is, and she's doing a fine job. But why would anybody want that job in Chicago? My Lord. All the drama going on in the city of Chicago, and Brandon Johnson wants to be mayor. He will tell us why, and again, how the campaign is coming along. Before we get to Brandon, let me say another brief word about Areva Martin show in real time, every day at 4:35. We are now, this is day 4. Yesterday concluded day 3 of the jury having the case in the tete-a-tete of USA v. MRT, United States versus Mark Thomas. Closing arguments were made last Friday. The jury got the case last Friday. Today, I believe, is Wednesday. So we are now on day 4 of the jury deliberating the outcome of this particular case. And so all the lawyers, the prosecutors, and the defense, along with MRT, are in the courtroom. They are in the building awaiting word from this jury. It could come today, it could come tomorrow, who knows. What's abundantly clear to me, as I've been following this, and I hope you've been tuning in every day at 4:35 to hear Ariva in conversation with our justice correspondent, Dion Raymond, about what happened in the courtroom that day. We are the only station, the only outlet in town. These days, everybody, I'm told by Dion, talked to Dion yesterday, so the courtroom and the hallways are not packed, but they're filled with reporters now who show up at the end, right, to hear what the verdict's going to be. But we've been there every day, haven't missed a day, been in that courtroom every single day talking about this case. And so we will see what happens, if anything, today. They've asked 6 questions now. The jury's come back with 6 different questions that they wanted the judge and the lawyers to answer for them as they move through their deliberations. And so we'll see if anything happens today. But at 4:35, tune in to Ariva Martin in real time for her conversation with our justice correspondent, Dion Raymond, who's in the courtroom right now. By the way, should that verdict come in earlier, before Ariva hits the air at 4 o'clock, one of us, Tavis, Smiley, Dominique, somebody around here, will get on the air immediately when we get the verdict and let you know what's going down. We'll give you a heads up. The minute we get a heads up that the verdict is going to be announced in 30 minutes or an hour, we'll come on the air and give you a heads up that the verdict is imminent. And one of our personalities, Ariva, Dominique, yours truly, somebody will be on the air to guide you through with Dion on the phone live from the courthouse what we have just learned about the verdict in the case of USA v. MRT. When we come forward, we'll be joined by Brandon Johnson, who could be the next brother mayor in the city of Chicago, the Windy City. You're listening to Tavis Smiley on the West Coast on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about. Good thing we've got 3 hours. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
KBLA 1580 Talk Radio congratulates Sal's Gumbo Shack for this Women's History Month. Surviving the pandemic and social unrest, Sal's Gumbo Shack continued to hold the community up with great food to all that came through the doors. Are you ready for the best gumbo in town? The best po' boy you've had? Sal's Gumbo Shack. We bring the bayou to you with real authentic soul food. Mama and Granny's recipes made with real butter, real love, real everything. Also introducing a healthy option from our jackfruit selection. And there's more. Mouth-watering desserts, peach cobbler, banana pudding, red and blue velvet cake, 7-Up pound cake, homemade with lots of love. To order, call 562-423-2113. That's 562-423-2113. Sal's is also providing training and employment to those serious about a career in the food industry and the opportunity to perhaps own your own Sal's Gumbo Shack one day. Visit salsgumboshack.com or stop by either locations, Bixby Knolls or Long Beach Boulevard. Sal's Gumbo Shack.
Periods don't care what you're doing, but your pad should. Get Always Triple Protection System in Always Day and Night Pads. Always Day Pads protect when active by wicking away gushes 2 times faster than leading store brands and giving us up to 100% leak-free and odor-free comfort. When we size up our pad at night, we get the same triple protection, plus up to 75% more coverage in the back for when we're laying down. No matter what, Always has you covered, day and night.
Conversations that matter. You're listening to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
And squeezing, hugging, girl, you know the rest, 'cause they tell me it never rains in Southern California.
I don't know who told you that, but they lied to you. Matter of fact, they should change the lyrics to "It always rains in Southern California." That's been the story of late. It's always raining in Southern California. Indeed, it is raining outside in Los Angeles right now, but that's just rain. I'm looking at my phone right now, and it's about to snow in Chicago. It's almost April. It's about to come down there, Brandon Johnson, is it not?
Right. That's like saying the wind never blows in Chicago either. Right. No, when the song came on, Tavis, that's exactly what I was thinking about. I'm like, I know it's raining there.
Yeah.
It's snow in the city of Chicago. And that's one of their best hits, by the way, too. So.
It is. It is. Yes, I love a hit mayor, man. I love a hit mayor. He knows Tony. He gets it. He's funny, and he's smart. And I'm delighted to have Brandon Johnson back on this program. As a matter of fact, as mayor, do you have the authority? I guess not, because somebody would have done it prior to. Do you have the authority to declare that it not snow as you get close to April in Chicago?
Hey, listen, man. As a baseball fan, we got to figure it out, man. My son is, all my kids play sports, but
right.
My two boys play baseball as well, man. And the hardest part about baseball season is it's April, man, and you're sitting out trying to root for your kid, and it feels like it's the end of the football season. So, between Mayor Bass and Mayor Johnson, we got some work to do with this weather.
Yeah, I hear you.
So I'll definitely figure out how to declare April snow-free.
Yeah, there you go. I'm sure the citizens are not. Now that would get you reelected easily. You could pull that off. You'd be reelected easily. We'll talk about the election in a moment, but I can guarantee you, if in your first 4 years you can pull that off, you'll get an easy reelection in the city of Chicago. Matter of fact, not only will you get a reelection, you get a bunch of Negroes moving back to Chicago if you can pull that off.
How about that, right?
You'll increase your tax base exponentially if you can pull that off, Brandon Johnson. Let me ask this question right quick, and we'll get to the politics. I got you to the bottom of the hour. So we got about 15 minutes in this conversation. So the world famously knows that Barack Obama, citizen of Chicago, is a huge White Sox fan. But that's the president of the United States who's a White Sox fan. When you are the mayor of the city of Chicago, can you choose between the Cubs and the White Sox?
That's a great question, and because we're so close to Election Day, brother, I don't want you to put on the spot. But what I will say is this: if people know anything about Chicago or the country, so I grew up in the '80s, man. We only had one station, Tavis. The only station we had was WGN.
Oh yeah.
So I'll let people draw their conclusions from there. And the Cubs did not have night games.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna let you draw your conclusion from that, man. So, but no, I'm a huge baseball fan. I think what they're doing on the South Side is remarkable. They're rebuilding. But I grew up, man, Gary Matthews, Asard, Sean Dunston, Leon Durham, of course, Andre Dawson, right? I mean, these are some incredible Fergie Jenkins. I mean, there's so many different amazing folks, obviously Ernie Banks. I can go on and on and on. I think the point for me, though, and seriously, one of the reasons why my son played baseball, because there's a really deep history of baseball in the continuum of just the trajectory for our political structure being shifted. You don't need a lecture from me, but Kurt Flood opening up the whole world of free agency, right? So when I think about baseball, I think about just the liberation of our people and, quite frankly, the opening of an economy all over the world where athletes around the world are benefiting from the struggle that black baseball players in particular endured. So is that political enough for you?
No, I was about to say, and I will. I love a mayor who is well-rounded, and I say that sincerely. No humor there. I love a mayor who is well-rounded, who has life experiences, who brings all that with him or her to the office, can do more than just talk politics, which can be boring for a lot of people. That's all you can do. But I love a mayor who has a worldview, who has a perspective, and that includes sports. I love sports because sports remind us on any given day, Brandon, as you well know, they remind us of what we are capable of in our own lives. If we work hard and discipline ourselves and do what needs to be done in our own lives, in the races that we are running, in the campaigns and contests that we are engaged in, we can be like Ernie Banks or like Tiger Woods or Michael Jordan, any number of great athletes, of course, out of Chicago over the years. And so I love sports as well because I think that it's instructive and informative in a lot of ways. Having said that, I would just say Harry Carey and leave it alone. We won't talk about Cubs and White Sox. Just say Harry Carey, and we'll leave it there. But let me follow you though in this conversation in the 10 or 12 minutes that we have left here. You mentioned the South Side. Let me ask you specifically, for those of us who know Chicago as I do and love Chicago, what specifically are you saying to voters on the South Side? And let me just throw in the West Side as well. What are you saying to those voters? And you know what I'm asking you?
Yeah. Look, for every $1 that a white family earns in the city of Chicago, black families earn 1 cent. And so when we talk about West and South Sides of the city of Chicago, we're bringing the city together. My wife and I, we're raising our children on the West Side of Chicago. The conditions are the same. The disinvestment that has plagued our communities for well over a generation in particular have left, our neighborhoods isolated and vulnerable. And what I've said repeatedly is that, the best thing that we can do for the people of Chicago, particularly West Side and South Side, is invest. And that investment is pretty clear, man. There's some great programs and great development that's happening. We just need to have the resources to do it. Everything from rehabbing and reviving our homes, putting them back on the tax rolls, and then incentivizing bus operators and train operators and child care workers with the ability to actually purchase them, right? So you can create workforce development and home ownership. The reason why that's important is because, like, I think this happened after the Obama administration. A lot of folks were trying to figure out, what impact did the black president have on Black America in particular. And I know there's been a great debate around this, but black families who earn $100,000 a year or more live in less safe communities than white families that make less than $30,000 a year, right? So this economic disparity that exists, it's real. In fact, I'll likely be the first mayor elected in the city of Chicago who wakes up in one of the most violent neighborhoods in the city. As much as we love Austin, it's beautiful, but there's been 400 homicides in the last 4 years. There's more homicides in the neighborhood that I'm raising my family in than the North Shore or where the more affluent families live combined, right? And so that's why investing in schools, transportation, housing, including public housing as well, health care, including mental health care services. Like, we're going to be in the neighborhood every single day because I actually wake up in the neighborhood, Tavis. Yeah. And so I'm going to be on the ground as a teacher, serving our people, as an organizer, serving our people, as a Cook County commissioner. The last thing that I'll say, it was controversial at the time, but people because they don't read and study history, many folks thought that I was coming up with something that was confrontational. Well, I built something called the Budget for Black Lives. The Budget for Black Lives. We took the entire county sheriff budget and built it around the needs of black people. But the impetus behind it was A. Philip Randolph and Barrett Rustin as they put together the Budget for All, which of course was the provocation of the New Deal, right? And so building that out and making sure that people understand that, you're only as strong as the area that is the most vulnerable. Making those investments and prioritizing the neighborhoods that have been disinvested in, that is top of mind for my administration. Yeah.
Let me ask you right quick. I got 3 or 4 things I want to run through in these minutes that we have here. My first question is, why stay? Why have you stayed on the West Side, given what you've unpacked about the neighborhood in which you live, Brandon Johnson?
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, look, the people of Chicago are loving people. It's neighborhood. When my wife and I moved on that particular block, we were the youngest couple. That was 15 years ago. I mean, it was a staple. Most of the homes on that block, Tavis, were turned over to the children and the children's children, right? And so there's deep history and legacy, particularly on the west side of Chicago. I mean, we know that Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. Stayed on the west side when he came. Al Raby, who was a public school teacher, who led boycotts. Chairman Fred, right? Chairman Fred, West Sider, right? I mean, there's so much tremendous history in black liberation, and that I've always felt connected to that form of our existence, our faith in the civil rights tradition. And in the west side of Chicago in particular really embodies that. And as Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. said, if you can do it in Chicago, you can do it anywhere in the world. And the west side was front and center for him.
I'm not naive in asking this question. I've written a book with Cornel West, as you know, about poverty called The Rich and the Rest of Us. And we talked in that book about poverty, economic inequality, and economic immobility. So I know this subject relatively well. But how can the disparity be that great in any American city? You said $1 for white folk to 1 cent for black folk?
Yep. Look, it's something I'm glad you all covered it, and I followed, you and Dr. Cornel West on this, and he's been to the city multiple times. Both of you all have, and Garfield Park is one of those neighborhoods that's just to the west of me, and I talk about Austin a lot, but Garfield Park has been described as a developing nation, and I don't think people know, and I thank you all for your work, how severe and isolating and humiliating that poverty can be. Look, I grew up low income, right? And there's a difference, right? Look, we would come home, the water wasn't on. Thank God for that long orange extension cord from your window to the neighbor's window. Like, we did all of that, right? And we weren't the worst, Tavis, man. We just thought that was just a way to just get through until the bill was paid, right? But we knew at some point the bill would be paid, right?
Right.
There are children who are waking up with 65,000 people who are unhoused, 20,000 are students. Like, this is what I saw in my classroom. This is what motivated me to become an organizer and eventually run for, County Board of Commissioners. And the reason why it's been that way is because we've had gatekeepers for a long time, where there's a selective few who get to have. And what I'm saying is, there's enough for everyone, and no one should lose at the expense of someone else winning.
Yeah.
And so the equitable distribution and the prioritization of the communities that have been neglected for a very long time, that's not going to happen under my watch because I live in those neighborhoods. I see it every day.
Yeah. Got less than 5 minutes here with you. Let me cover some more ground here. We just, as you, I'm sure well know, just saw the conclusion of a 3-day teachers strike here in L.A. last week. Teachers and support staff, janitors and cafeteria workers and the like. SEIU 99 called the union, Local 99 called the strike rather, and the teachers, UTLA, United Teachers LA, joined in. We had the president of the teachers union on this program the day before the strike happened. So Cecily Myrick Cruz came to see us to talk about the strike. But the whole country saw the second largest school district in the nation go out for 3 days. Students went back on Friday, and it was announced on Friday that a deal had been reached. So we got through that, and thankfully it worked on the behalf of the unions, and they got a deal. You have been a teacher. You're supported by the teachers union in Chicago. And your opponent is supported by the police union, so there are two powerful unions who are taking sides in this race. How is this going to work out for you, given that you have the teachers behind you, and how's it going to work out for you, given that the police league, the police union, is against Brandon Johnson?
Yeah, look, first of all, thank you for just laying that out that way, and I'm happy to be supported by SEIU, CTU, the National Nurses United, Illinois Nurses Association. Like, working class people are throwing down with me. Bus operators, trade operators. I mean, I come from the working class. And what I've said repeatedly is that serving in the city of Chicago, particularly when you're serving in communities that have been disinvested in, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a firefighter, whether you are a nurse, a bus aide, or a police officer, you see these extreme conditions. And the hardest part in many instances in doing your job is having to do someone else's job as well. And it's why I've said repeatedly that, and this is interesting enough, the Los Angeles Police Department actually agrees with me on this. I've been pushing for something called treatment, not trauma. And basically it's an ordinance that would call for first responders like social workers and counselors, EMT, to show up to the crises that make up almost 40% of the 911 calls, which are mental health crises.
Mm-hmm.
And police officers are being asked to be marriage counselors, noise control. I'm not saying that these things are not serious. We should have serious responses to them. But what I've said repeatedly, I'm going to support workers.
Yeah. But
I also have to protect the residents. I have a fiduciary responsibility to protect taxpayers, right? So we have to have an equitable budget that speaks to the values and the needs of other people of Chicago. But we also have to make sure that we are not putting police officers in a position where they're being asked to do not just their job, but someone else's. This is an awful case. Quantonio LeGrier on the west side of Chicago was having a mental health crisis.
Yep.
The only equipment on the scene were guns. And then not only was he murdered, but Betty Jones, his neighbor who came to his defense, she was murdered as well. If we would have had treatment, not trauma, I'm confident that those lives would have been spared.
Yeah.
And so, again, my opponent, of course, is heavily supported, by the FOP, and their leader just said that if I get elected, there's going to be blood on the streets and that officers are going to quit. Like, that is some real provocative language. Like, teachers are not saying that if Paul Vallis gets elected that they're going to quit, right? But this has, like, a real reminiscent of January 6th. People are already calling the question because my candidacy is surging, that they're setting up this scenario that we're still in the election, going to be blowing the streets. Our job, of course, is to continue to bring people together, and that's what I'm going to do. That's what I've done as a teacher, as an organizer, as a Cook County commissioner, and it's what I'm doing as I prepare to take over the fifth floor with the people of Chicago.
You got 60 seconds left here. How is the campaign going as you see it? And I see you get some big endorsements coming your way.
Yes, I'm looking forward to MLK3, as we call them, coming to town. James Clyburn, Bernie Sanders is here tomorrow, Elizabeth Warren, Reverend Jesse Jackson. I mean, we're getting support from all over the country, but here locally, Delia Ramirez, Congressman Jonathan Jackson, again, independent political organizations. I mean, Tavis, it is literally multicultural, multi-generational movement here.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's a coincidence that it's on April 4th, not just the assassination. We're talking about the resurrection of the city of Chicago. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, if we can do it in Chicago, we can do it anywhere in the world. So I'm very proud to be part of a rich tradition, and I'm looking forward to April 4th and becoming the next mayor of the city of Chicago.
I look forward to following the race, Brandon, and wish you all the best. Thank you for your time. Get back to the campaign trail and take care of your voice. I can hear you straining, man, but get something.
Yeah, man, a little bit. We're almost there.
Yeah, I'm drinking something right now myself, trying to hold mine together. Thank you for your time. We'll pull in and praying for you and talk to you soon, Brandon. All the best to you, sir.
Be well.
Cook County Commissioner Brandon Johnson, one of the finalists for mayor in the city of Chicago. Just getting started on today's program. More when we come forward after news, traffic, and sports on KBLA Talk 1580.
Be sure to like and follow Tavis Smiley at The Real Tavis Smiley and get Twitter updates at Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues when we come forward.
Good morning, I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Gay pride events may soon be banned in Texas public schools. Republicans in the state legislature have filed a bill that would outlaw celebrations of a sexual preference.
Everybody needs to stop instructing kids in sexual preference, no matter what your ideology is, and focus on teaching kids.
The bill, filed by State Representative Ken King, would fine teachers that organize pride events. An X-Files reboot is on the way. Original series creator Chris Carter said in an interview that Black Panther director Ryan Coogler, who is African-American, is reworking the sci-fi series with a diverse cast. X-Files originally aired on Fox from 1993 to 2001. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Crash in La Cañada has all lanes stopped on the 210 eastbound at Berkshire Avenue. They're trying to clean things up right now. Traffic stops at Foothill Boulevard. Crash in Legion Park taking up at least the right-hand lane on the 110 southbound at Stadium Way. That's a tough right from Avenue 52. And in Mid-City LA, got a crash report at 10 eastbound at Robinson Boulevard. Looks like that's stuck in the left-hand lane. The 10 eastbound is so from the 405. In Torrance, watch for a vehicle stalled on the 405 north at Crenshaw Boulevard. Stuck in one of the middle lanes, you're going to see stop-and-go traffic on the 110.
For your guaranteed biggest refund and 50% off tax prep, switch to Jackson Hewitt. 50% off is a limited time offer for new clients filing at participating locations. Max value $200. Visit jacksonhewitt.com/50 for terms.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Clippers are in Memphis for the start of a 3-game trip. The Lakers begin a 4-game trip in Chicago. The highest paid single-season salary in Major League Baseball history belongs to Angels pitcher Shohei Ohtani. Ohtani has a 1-year salary this season, paying him $30 million. Add in his $35 million in endorsements, and he's looking at a $65 million income this year. The asking price for Baltimore Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson begins with 2 first-round picks. How many teams are willing to give that up? No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. This sports report was brought to you by Original Taco Pete.
It's Aaron from Original Taco Pete. Let us cater your March Madness munchies. Order with us at Original Taco Pete on Grubhub, Uber Eats, DoorDash, or stop into our Slauson and Crenshaw location. We'll feed you soon.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
Tell me you're the boy and girl. You are young, gifted, and black.
I'm young, gifted, and black.
And that's a fact.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we do more than just talk.
Hey there, I'm Jared Hill, president of the National Association of Black Journalists of Los Angeles, and I just want to say thank you for the benevolent $10,000 donation and scholarships for the next generation of black journalists.
And I'm Haywood Galbraith, photojournalist and founder of the Minority Photojournalism Institute. Thanks, KBLA, for your generous $10,000 scholarship gift to help us train the next generation of black photojournalists.
Congratulations to all the students who will benefit from the scholarship dollars raised at our Black History Month luncheon, honoring black legends in LA media. When we come forward at KBLA Talk 1580, we're bringing everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us.
KBLA Talk 1580 congratulates U.S. Olympic gold medalist and Hall of Famer Jeanette Bolden Pickens, owner of the 27th Street Bakery, during this Women's History Month. 27th Street Bakery sends a huge thank you to the community for all its support during the pandemic, serving the Los Angeles community with their signature sweet potato pie since 1956 and third-generation baker. The goal has never changed. Keep the business thriving for generations to come. Made with the freshest ingredients in each yam peeled by hand. 27th Street Bakery puts the home back in homemade with its signature vanilla added to all its amazing products. Pies, cakes, cobblers, tea cakes, and the newest item, creamy sweet potato cheesecake. Call 323-233-3469. That's 323-233-3469. Have your order shipped by visiting 27thstreetbakery.com or stop by 2700 South Central Avenue, Los Angeles, California, 90001, Tuesdays through Saturdays, 8 to 4.
KBLA Talk 1580 celebrates Women's History Month, spotlighting women leaders in our community. We're creating positive change. This KBLA Women's Leaders Series spotlights Jacqueline Williams. Please meet Jacqueline Williams. She's a Walmart market manager in Redlands, California. Jacqueline started as an hourly stocker and was promoted quickly to department manager, to Tire Lube Express manager, to operations assistant manager. From there, she became a market technician specialist managing multiple Tire Lube locations in Walmart. Her leadership and strategic management of successful Tire Lube Express got her promoted to shift manager, store manager, and market manager. Jacqueline oversees 9 Walmart store locations in San Bernardino County with P&L responsibility of over $850 million annually. Responsibilities include direct leadership of 9 store managers, 7 store leaders, over 70 assistant store coaches, and 2,800 hourly associates. Jacqueline's leadership talents have been on exhibit at Odyssey Corporate Boot Camp and Basine, Women in Leadership events, Women in Retail, and has been a speaker at Southern California External Diversity Recruitment event and more. KBLA and Walmart salutes Jacqueline Williams. This is KBLA Talk 1580, where hate meets a scholarly match.
I'm Tavis Smiley. Glad to have you in with us today in our first hour. I had a great conversation just now with Brandon Johnson, who could be the next brother mayor in the city of Chicago. We thank him for taking time away from the campaign trail to talk to us on our program. Now, a conversation about new data about how the high rate of joblessness for black men affects black women. Pleased to be joined now by Dr. Algernon Austin, Director for Race and Economic Justice at the Center for Economic and Policy Research. Dr. Austin, good to have you back. First of all, how are you, sir?
I am doing well, and it's good to be back. Always a pleasure.
Pleasure's all mine, and I love being downloaded with the data that you often share with us that we have to wrestle with even when we don't want to. So let me start with this. On balance, it makes perfect sense. It seems novel enough to me that the joblessness rate for black men would, in fact, in some ways, impact African American women. So tell me what I'm not focusing in on. What am I missing here? Because you can't tease me that way. Yeah.
Well, some people actually don't get that.
Yeah,
which is,
that's weird.
You know, they should, but they don't. I mean, some people kind of automatically, reflexively go into this sort of men versus women frame and assume that, well, if you're helping black men, then you're hurting black women, or if you're helping black women, then you're hurting black men. And the report is really trying to disabuse people of that idea and recognize that, black men and black women live in the same families, in the same neighborhoods, and same communities, and we have to find ways to lift up both, and it's not one or the other.
So tell me more then about the impact that the high rate of joblessness for black men is in fact having on black women.
Well, the other important point that people don't realize is how severe the black men's jobs crisis is. From 2000 to now, there are typically about 1 million more black women working than black men. For the last 2 decades, that's been the case. And for all other racial groups, you typically see more men working than women. So the black population is unique in having this particularly low rate of employment for black men. And again, it's a low rate of employment for black men. It's not a high rate, particularly high rate of employment for black women. Black women, too, have a high unemployment rate. So we do want an even higher employment rate for black women, but the rate for black men is really incredibly low. It's lower than for white men, for Latino men, for American Indian men, for Asian men. You don't see this disparity, this kind of male-female disparity that you see in the black population in any other racial population. So that's an important thing that people don't realize.
It is an important thing. You've teed it up, and so now we're all curious, and I'm not naive, of course, in asking this, but why are black men uniquely different when it comes to employment than every other race of people in this country?
There are several factors. One is the decline of manufacturing has hit black men pretty hard. The manufacturing sector in the United States was a place for good jobs for people who didn't have a college degree, and the black male population is less likely to be college educated than the white male population, for example, and black men relied pretty strongly on those manufacturing jobs. So with the decline, the deindustrialization of America, that has hurt black men. The other thing is the just general anti-black discrimination in the labor market. A white man with a high school who dropped out of high school has a better chance of getting a job than a black man with a high school diploma. The other thing is mass incarceration. So mass incarceration has really hit the black male population harder than any other population. And if you have a criminal record, I mentioned already, being black is often a strike against you in the labor market. But once you add a criminal record on that makes it extremely difficult. So I think those are the three of the major factors that leads to such a low rate of employment for black men.
I'm looking at this list of the three things you just identified. Deindustrialization, number one. Old school racism, number two. And mass incarceration, number three. And I'm not so sure that of that list of three things that you put your finger on, that there's anything much that black men can do about the first one for sure. We don't control manufacturing in this country. We're just victimized by the deindustrialization. So not much we can do about the first. And when I look at the other two, racism and mass incarceration, I'm not so sure there's much we can do about the second one. Racism is still the most intractable issue, as I say all the time, in this country. And the third one, I could go out on a limb and argue that we don't have to behave in ways that get us incarcerated. But I'm not naive here again either, because I recognize that there's a police state that we live in and that black men are targeted by that police state. So my point here is, I hope, pretty obvious, that the three things primarily that hold black men back when it comes to employment, not sure there's much that we can do about any of those three. And that, beyond the data, is even more distressing, Dr. Austin.
It is, but I would say it's not quite, I don't think it's quite as bleak as you may present it. So we have seen some reduction, prior to COVID in particular, reduction in mass incarceration. We have seen some positive reforms. It certainly has not been enough by any measure, but we have seen some positive trends there. So I think, the point of doing this work is really to get people to recognize the problem and mobilize and organize, because that's how change happens. So I think, given the recent progress that's been made in mass incarceration, we should be hopeful that with more organizing and agitation, that we can make some progress there. In terms of discrimination, that's a long struggle, especially given the conservatives, the sort of colorblind. Mm-hmm. Well, not even colorblind. The conservatives on the court who refuse to acknowledge that racial discrimination exists. the decline in manufacturing, there has been some good news in the sense that the bipartisan infrastructure act that Biden passed, and also the Inflation Reduction Act, some of the jobs that are, that's going to help. That's going to help manufacturing jobs to a degree. The other thing that I talk about in the report is there's this scholar at the Brookings Institution who talks about HEAL jobs, and that's health, education, administration, and literacy. And that's a sector, particularly the health sector, that's been growing. And what he calls for, and what I agree with, is we need to figure out how can we get more men in healthcare occupations and in education occupations, because those are growing sectors of the economy. It's not an easy task in any way, because unfortunately a lot of those jobs are bad jobs. So you have to make them good jobs, regardless.
Right.
But you have to make them good jobs if we expect men to move into that sector. So there's work to be done, but I do think that it's not completely bleak.
Yep. It's not completely bleak, but when we come forward, I want to pivot ever so gently. When Dr. Austin joins us on this program, we are typically discussing data. And my questions to that end up being primarily political and economic. When we come forward, though, I want to ask him a personal question. Not political, not economic, but personal. And the personal question is how he has dedicated himself all these years to working in a field where he's tracking data about black folk. And you probably know where I'm going here, right? The data that he's tracking about black folk tends to be pretty negative and pretty stubborn. So I hear his point. He's been optimistic that things aren't as bleak as I say they are. Well, he's a nice guy. I think I'm right. He's being kind and generous and charitable. That's a charitable read. But I am curious on a personal level how he dedicates himself every day to tracking data that is rarely encouraging, rarely empowering, rarely uplifting when it comes to black people, number one. And I want to get his take on what his research suggests to him vis-a-vis black women's views on black men's high rate of joblessness. What do sisters actually think about that? Dr. Algernon Austin is our guest. More when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
We may be LA's newest talk station, but when you're punching above your weight, it's not about whether you can throw a punch. Can you take a punch? We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. And we don't black down.
California is a great place to live and work, but those aren't easy things to do for students also going to college. That's why the state created the Californians for All College Corps, a way for students to build skills and help others while earning up to $10,000 for school. Commit to serve your community and we'll help you pay for college. Spots will fill up fast, so learn more and apply today at www.cacollegecorps.com. That's www.cacollegecorps.com. California is a great place to live and work, but those aren't easy things to do for students also going to college. That's why the state created the Californians for All College Corps, a way for students to build skills and help others while earning up to $10,000 for school. Commit to serve your community and we'll help you pay for college. Spots will fill up fast, so learn more and apply today at www.cacollegecorps.com. That's www.cacollegecorps.com.
Our Weekly Los Angeles is the largest audited black newspaper in the state of California with a distribution of over 50,000 copies weekly. Pick up a copy every Thursday to get the latest news on African American communities of LA. You can also keep up with what's going on in Los Angeles and surrounding cities by going to www.ourweekly.com. The Our Weekly website is updated daily with the current news about us and for us. For your advertising needs, Our Weekly offers economical advertising packages to fit your budget. Feel free to call Our Weekly Los Angeles at 323-905-1300 or visit the website at www.ourweekly.com. Our Weekly Los Angeles, reporting news that matters to you.
It's getting
Talk 1580 is apparently the talk of the town. From the LA Times to our talk radio competitors.
Hey, there was a story in the LA Times about Tavis Smiley. Now he is back with his own radio station, KBLA, black-owned and oriented towards the black audience. So, Mo, considering your knowledge of Tavis in his audience, what's your take on this?
Well, I think in a general industry sense, I think it's always good when there are more outlets, there are more talk radio, there's more voices and representation. At that point, I think talk radio had been too homogenous for too long.
Real quickly, is it going to succeed, yes or no?
I think it's going to succeed.
You think?
There's a new sheriff in town.
We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we don't black down. Interrogating your assumptions and expanding your inventory of ideas. Let's get back to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
Dr. Algernon Austin, I will hold my personal question that I teed up a moment ago for a moment. But I want to start by asking right quick, what's the research telling you about black women's views on black men's high rate of joblessness?
Yes. So about 80%, based on, this is a nationally representative survey that we commissioned at the end of last year, and 80% of black women are concerned about the broad problem of joblessness for black men in America. 80%. Mm-hmm. So, a significant majority of black women recognize this as a problem and that needs addressing. The other thing, this is the general problem in America of joblessness for black men. When you go to, what about the black men that are specifically in your family? What about your sons? What about your brothers? What about your husbands, boyfriends, partners? Basically, around 2/3 of black women have some level of concern about whether the men in their lives will be able to get or keep a job. So again, this is a significant concern, not just as a broad American problem, but in their own lives, black women are worried about this. Mm-hmm. About 2/3 believe that if there were more jobs for black men in black communities, there would be less crime in black communities. Mm-hmm. So that's another important thing, and the research does support that. About almost 80% recognize that if you help men and boys in their black communities, you will also have a positive impact on women and girls. Mm. So, yes. And let me just say, finally, not surprisingly, given everything that I said, over 80%, 84% of black women say there needs to be more jobs available for black people in black communities. So you hear people talk about, well, the labor market is too hot and everybody who wants a job can get a job. Not in black communities. There's still a very high rate of joblessness in black communities, and black women are aware of this, and they see a need. The overwhelming majority see a need for more jobs in black communities.
I'm watching my clock. My time is getting tight. Let me ask you this question right quick, and then we'll move on to what I said I wanted to cover earlier, and that is the following. I could tell at the very beginning of this conversation, asking the audience, that you were chagrined when I raised this notion of how the high rate of joblessness for black men does, in fact, impact and affect black women. I can tell you were a bit chagrined, and you found it a bit disconcerting that every time we raise this issue, people automatically go in and make this a he versus she, a black man versus black woman thing. How debilitating is that long term? I mean, you take my point.
Yeah, it's ultimately destructive because as these black women are recognizing, if their fathers, their brothers, their boyfriends and husbands are jobless, that's going to hurt them. So the report is showing that there is both an emotional harm in terms of worry, but there's also a financial burden that this joblessness places on black women, because black women end up often supporting these black men who don't have jobs. Yeah. So if these more black men had jobs, that improves the financial health of the entire community.
Makes sense to me. When we come forward in our remaining moments with Dr. Algernon Austin, the question, how does one dedicate himself or herself every day to tracking data about a particular group of people where the data seems to always be negative. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580.
Say the quiet part out loud. KBLA Talk 1580.
Gotta stay fresh, my house shot with a rest spot. Shot with a rest spot. Shot with a rest spot.
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all the official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
The bounce is back.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. South Central Youth Empowered Through Action is the youth component of the impactful CBO, known as the Community Coalition. South Central Youth Empowered Through Action has chapters at almost every South LA high school. Say Yeah, as they are popularly known, is located at 80th and Vermont, but serves young people all over South LA. Under the COCO umbrella, they train youth organizers, help underserved scholars prepare for college, and work with students to help them gain admission to top universities. South Central Youth Empowered Through Action fosters teen activism, where young people have led campaigns moving tens of millions of dollars to South LA schools and forcing officials to make AP classes available to students in under-resourced institutions. SCES scholars have taken part in the March on Washington, been published in major news outlets, and been elected to city council. Long before she was mayor, Karen Bass started the program when she founded the Community Coalition. To donate, volunteer, or enroll a student in South Central Youth Empowered Through Action, please visit cocsouthla.org. cocsouthla.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Let's unpack a little bit more with Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues right now.
Got about 3 minutes left. 3 minutes left in conversation with Dr. Algernon Austin, who's Director for Race and Economic Justice at the Center for Economic and Policy Research. As I said earlier, Dr. Austin, I tend to, in these conversations with you, unpack data with you. And my questions tend to be, for obvious reasons, political and economic. I've never asked you a personal question, but I want to ask now if I can. How is it that you do this work every single day when, by and large, the data that you're tracking, because you happen to be tracking it about black people in this place called America, tends to be not so encouraging, if I can be kind in that regard?
No, you're right. It's difficult work. It's difficult work and discouraging from time to time. But I also think of our ancestors who I always say, look, they went up against a lot worse than what I have to go up against and what we're going up against today. So if they were able to keep pushing forward, I have to do the same. But
the difference is this: our ancestors had to push forward against all the odds. I get that. The difference is that they weren't looking at data. they were pushing forward based not on optimism, as I say all the time, but based on hope. They did what they did because they were hopeful that things would get better for their offspring in the years and generations to come. So they were motivated by hope. You're looking at data, which oftentimes makes it difficult to be hopeful.
Yes, it is difficult. It is depressing. I think the last time I was on your show, I talked about 60 years of unemployment disparities, the 2-to-1, and yes, it is a challenge. But like King was doing in his last year, and really recognizing that you needed Poor People's Campaign, you needed a broad multiracial movement. I am still basically that's. I think King was right. That's what we need. Deindustrialization didn't just happen to black people, right? So there is a multiracial base there. Mass incarceration disproportionately hurt black people, absolutely. But there was also an increase in incarceration for white people and Latinos. And similarly, yes, there's high rates of joblessness among the black population, but also in Appalachia there's high rates of joblessness, and in the American Indian population and in the Southwest. So I continue with my Full Employment for All campaign, really trying to build that mass multiracial movement that can move us in a positive direction.
It's an amazing campaign. I'm glad you're behind it. It's called the Full Employment for All campaign, and it's great work. I'm still stuck on the first half hour of our program today when Brandon Johnson, who could be the next brother mayor of Chicago, said to us that, speaking of data, that in Chicago, black folk earn, on average, 1 cent for every $1 that our white brothers and sisters make. 1 cent for every $1, and that's in the city of Chicago. I digress. But I'm glad you're doing the work, because we can't know what we got to do if we don't have data to unpack it for us. So, Dr. Austin, thank you once again for your work. We'll talk again down the road, sir.
Yeah, my pleasure once again. I can't wait to do it again.
Likewise. Hour 2 of Tavis Smiley. After news, traffic, and sports, you're listening to KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
We welcome you to a Wednesday. I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Nashville, Tennessee will honor the victims of this week's school shooting with a citywide vigil tonight. Local leaders, including Mayor John Cooper, are expected to gather. The vigil begins at 6:30. That's African-American attorney Johnny Cochran died after a long battle with cancer.